This is October the 31st of 2006, and my name is Barbara McGraw, and I'm interviewing Bill Botkin in the archives room of St. Mary's Parish. We want to thank you, Bill, for being a part of this interview. And our first question is, how long in the parish and reason for your choice?
Well, there was no choice. I was born here. I was born in 1939. My mother came over from St. Lawrence Parish when Father Sear was the assistant at St. Lawrence, and he was given the assignment to start St. Mary Parish. And so they came over to the east side of town. Of course, there was a group of people that came over here in 1930 when he started. And I think it was in December that they had their first Mass here. What was it, August? It was August the 15th? Or just, no, it was I think it was December 8th was the first Mass here in 1930. And my mother, of course, at that time was single. And she'd been married, and her husband was deceased. And she, during the years after that, then, of course, met my dad. But anyway, in 1930, she came over here as a parishioner, early parishioner, and the diocese purchased this land with the idea that the parishioners would pay it back, and they did, of course, later. But my early recollection, of course, this was before I was born, but I suppose others have mentioned this, but the boundaries of this parish, as far as the land goes, was, of course, it's the corner of Nichols and Jackson here in Muncie on the northwest corner, and it on the west side was bounded by the Kitzelman home and a big estate, and on the north, just north of where now stands the Knoll Hall, and I think the driveway is also included on the property, and just north of that drive is where the boundary was to the north. So the house over here and the garage that's just north of Knoll Hall was part of the Kitzelman estate. And the Kitzelmans and the people around this area, of course, having the only parish in Muncie, a very anti-Catholic town, they were dead set against having into the Catholic Church. So anyway, they came over here and bought this land, and of course people protested about that. And of course time went on, and of course 1930 was a bad time because 1929 was the crash. They entered into the deepest part of the Depression then by 1933, so the first 3 years were bumpy, but they got along. Father Sear's cousin was the housekeeper. This was his father's sister's daughter, and they eventually, and I think maybe it happened at that time that Mr. Sear came with Father Sear, and that's Moses Sear, his father, and they came here, and he lived in the house that is called the Old Rectory now. And it's just east of the fence that surrounds the present rectory. It was always a nice home, and so the housekeeper and Father Sear and his dad lived there, and they eventually with some, of course they had trustees back then. They called them trustees around. I remember Mike O'Toole was one of them, nice old fella. And I think probably if I had a picture in front of me of the other, Joe Broderick probably was another at the time that had Broderick's factory. But anyway, if I had a picture of them in front of me at the time, now I could probably identify most of them. But once they got the church built, they had a room in the back for the kids' religious education. And Father Sear himself and his dad and a couple of 3 other people made chairs to go in there, and they took orange crates and they set them up on end, and then sliced one end down diagonal and then you could a child could sit in there, and they painted them up. I don't remember what color they were. It seemed like they were orange when I was there, kind of a dark orange. Anyway, Father Shear made the comment to somebody, and Mom told me this. Of course, I wasn't around there. Said, "We'll never fill them. We'll never fill them. There's not enough people coming over here to fill them." Well, we surpassed that for sure. Anyway, I was born, my dad and Mom got together, and I was born in 1939. So, of course, my very first recollection was not immediately in 1939, but shortly after that, I know I was talking, and I could remember some things that happened. I remember being in church with Mom, and I could stand up, so I was probably 2, and I could talk. And I remember being in there, and to me, now Vivian, she didn't, of course she came later, but Vivian Sear, but she thinks the church was always faced where the altar was on in the basement church on the east end. But it seems to me, when I was real small, that the church was turned around to where the altar was actually on the west end of the church. And of course, you would come down the steps in the front. And of course, the Noel Hall was not there. It was just a basement church, plus, I think it was probably about 6 feet of window space from the ground up to where the roof was. And on the north side, there's still windows at the basement level where you can see where there was always windows. They were not stained glass windows in that basement church. They were white, but frosted, where you couldn't see through them. And they were leaded like stained glass windows. And I have a picture somewhere here of the basement of the. You can see, Barbara, in this one. Now this is the statue I'll tell you about later, but that statue is actually facing the altar. This was the day they were getting ready to take it away, but the statue is facing the altar, so behind the altar you can see back into the pews and over into the windows on the side. Yeah, there they are over there. And so anyway, and also I remember that first time that I recall being in church was at 2 or 3, that I always was quiet, especially in church. And they always, at that time, they didn't have pews. That I believe that they had folding chairs, possibly with kneelers on them. Vivian thinks they had kneelers, but it just seems to, I don't remember the kneelers. I remember the chairs, and I remember being there and standing up and sitting down and so on. And then we would go occasionally, and I wouldn't always go. Now, my dad was not Catholic at the time. He was a 32nd degree Mason at that time, but not a hard, fast 32nd degree. But anyway, so he was not Catholic, so he stayed home. And so I didn't go all the time with Mom, but through the week I want to go to church. So, okay, she said, "Oh, okay, we'll go over." And we went, and there was somebody, I don't know who it was, came around the church and said, "Well, you can't go in there, it's flooded." And I said, "Well, I want to go in there." So Mom said, "You can't go in there." Well, we looked in and looked downstairs, and they had water in there. And over the years, it happened occasionally, not often, but once in a while there would be water downstairs in the church. And so time went on to where I grew up a little bigger. And of course, this was before they had a school here. And they had the first, a little bit later, we got our first assistant, Father Bob Fosselman. And Father Fosselman was around for a while, and I knew him as a little kid, and when I was a little kid, and he was a very nice priest. And the war was coming on. It was like 42, and they needed chaplains, and he went to service. And I remember him coming by and saying goodbye.
Now, were you around, what, about 3 or 4 at that time?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
4, maybe 5. Something like
Okay.
So anyway, had his uniform on, so he must have been off to some kind of a training before that. Well, anyway, he left, and then, of course, when the war was over, he did come back, although he didn't come back to the parish. By that time, we had Father Muller. Father Charles Muller was here. He was here for a long time. I don't know how many years he was here, but he stayed up through after Father Falseman. Father Muller was here till I was old enough to start serving Mass, which meant he was here during when I made my first communion. And I think, 9, you start serving Mass, something like that. And of course, you're 7, along about 7 or 8 when you have the first communion. But anyway, now is when I start recalling more things that went on. For instance, we would have summer school during the summer. Now the parish area, the grounds were growing up quite a bit with bushes. There was a lot of bushes around. They kept it mowed, but there was still a lot of heavy bushes everywhere, and a lot of spaces where there wasn't any grass. And of course, with a lot of people coming and going by this time, there was a lot of land that was just trampled out in walkways and so on, because we didn't have sidewalks and so on, really. There's one around the church, and one around to the south side of the church, like there is today. I think it's still there. I have to look. I've been talking about the basement church in Noel Hall. But anyway, this parish house that we had was several feet east of the rectory. It was the rectory and the driveway going east, and the driveway went out on Jackson. And then there was this parish house, and it was an old house that needed paint badly and was used for everything. We used that as we do today at Noel Hall. We used that as we'd have breakfast in there. We'd have summer school for the kids. We had I was there a lot, and we had 2 weeks in the summer where you'd go for summer school, and this, of course, was all religious education, and you'd go there in the morning, and you go to Mass, and then you'd have some kind of a little breakfast there, and I remember the milk cartons. And they had in that house a stack of, another member of our parish was Galen Funk, and Mr. Funk owned the Coca-Cola company here. His brother, Elmo Funk, owned the one in Henderson. So that was handy, because they of course, they furnished all the pop for all the events and everything, the Coke. And they had remember the old trays, the Coke trays with the pictures, and you see reproductions of them today. But these are all original, and they must have had 100 or more, maybe 200 stacked in the parish house. And they had folding tables, they had folding chairs in there, and there were several rooms. I don't think I ever went upstairs there. It was kind of like a story and a half, and they had a porch with a like a brown brick railing and with a cement top on it and a cap, and it faced out to Jackson Street, and that was it. Well, anyway, this place, and there was always a bunch of women from the parish working in the kitchen, cooking the noodles and all that stuff. And but I remember very much the Father Muller teaching the servers, and I still got my card that has all the Latin on it that he gave us at the time. With Adeum Glorificat Juventutem Meum. That was drilled into us, and we learned that and learned how to serve. So the time went on, and Father Muller was still there, and at one point Fatima Father, the priest that came up with the slogan, "A family that prays together stays together," Father Peyton, he was getting to be well known. He was around the, I never saw him, he never came here, I don't think. But anyway, the Fatima and the Rosary was getting to be very well publicized along at that time. And they came up with, I think it was 4 statues that of the Blessed Mother of Fatima, and that statue, I suppose that, because we were St. Mary's, and I think this is the reason they came, they went to all the parishes that had anything to do or dedicated or consecrated to the Blessed Mother. So what they did, these were, I assume, made out of wood. I don't know. I was still pretty young, but I was serving. I had a cousin that was 4 years older, and he was also serving. And he told his mother, he said, "We'll go down and carry the statue." She said, "Yeah, right." Because what they did, they had 4 of these statues in the world. And there was a priest, I think they were probably all 4 priests, but the priest came from Rome, and there was one of these statues that circulated through this country, and it came to St. Mary's. And it was blessed by Pope Pius XII, and they would have a whole week of like a open retreat during that time, and we'd be here at least every night at benediction during that week, and this priest would talk about, he would give a homily and talk about Blessed Mother and the Rosary and so on. Well, anyway, so I was also in the procession, and I carried the crown coming into the church. And my folks and I, we didn't take too much time to carry a camera with us, so I wish we had it more so around here. But I did have a camera, and I took a picture of the statue, which I have here. Now, the statue was placed up on a pedestal beside the altar, and it was there for the whole week. And so the last, maybe the day before, the last day, I decided, well, I wanted to get a picture of that statue, and I brought my camera and I took a picture. And then they took the statue down, took the crown off of it, turned it around, and they set it on some kind of a box or something out facing the altar, right at the opening of the communion rail. Well, they left it there for a while, and I took another picture. And that's the only picture that came out. The others that I took, while it was up by the altar, I didn't get any pictures of, but I did this. So this is the only one I got. And but this particular picture, as we talked about earlier, shows the back of the church and a little bit of the pews. But of course, after they did away, of course, with the folding chairs back a few years before this, when they did get pews. They got nice ones. They were nice pews. And I don't know whatever happened to those pews, actually. But anyway, they by this time, let's see, well, right about the time I made my first communion, my dad started taking instructions.
I'm sure that made the family happy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
So anyway, where are we going from here? You want to just go forward, or?
Okay. What part belonging to your parish plays in your part?
Well, it's a
plays
church,
in your
of course.
life?
It's a church, yeah. But as far as the history goes, it was in 49, I think. Of course, we still had the basement church then. And I served Mass a lot. I served a lot of weddings. And there's people around here that are celebrating their 50th anniversary that I served weddings. Pat and Bob O'Donoghue was one of them.
Oh, okay.
And Gene and Johnny Smith, because I don't think, he might be that old, I don't know. Anyway, Semelinos lived across the street. I served their wedding. There was a lot of them. During all this time, Miss Holden, Catherine Holden, was playing the organ and singing and so forth still. By about 1944, Vivian Sear came and replaced her cousin, I can't remember the other cousin's name that was here before that. But anyway, then Vivian was here. I think Vivian was 19 years old when she came in. I think. But I just gave her age away. If that's true. Well, anyway, so they were in the back of the church during daily mass, and Mom and I would make it to daily mass occasionally, not all the time. And I would serve, and I served a lot on Sunday. From 1930 on, and even more so, of course I knew when I was serving, benediction and rosary was instituted in this parish from the very beginning in 1930. It went on from there and became, it was a tradition up until just lately. But on Sunday night, that church was packed. I'm assuming it would hold about 200 people. I don't know. I really don't know what the capacity of the pews were. But anyway, on Sunday nights, we would come to Rosary and Benediction, and either Father Sear or Father Muller would have the Rosary and Benediction, and the servers would try to get there early so they could serve, because they didn't have anything. They didn't have servers actually scheduled for that, but you didn't need to, because you always had 4 servers, and usually 6 or 8 would want to come and serve, and occasionally we'd even have 6 on the altar for benediction, which it didn't need it all that many, but 2 can do it. But anyway, so that was very benediction, rosary was very popular at the time, and I think mostly a lot of us because they didn't have radios. Well, they had radios, but they didn't have televisions and other things to distract them. But the parish was a good parish, and after Mass on Sunday morning, there was at least 2 Masses. Maybe they had 3. But we would usually go to 9 o'clock Mass, because now during that Mass, the children were in the front pews. We would get up at time for the sermon and go to the back room for our religious education. But Father Sear would talk long enough, I think probably close to a half hour, that we got a half-hour instruction every Sunday morning back here in the back room. Then we would come back out, be in the front pew, and the Mass would continue. And so let's see, during that, let's see, what else was I going to say about that? Anyway, one of of course, the main thing here is, of course, is the Eucharist and the Holy Eucharist and the church, and all this other stuff is on the side, like the Legion of the Mary. I belong to the secular Franciscans. We used to call it the Third Order of St. Francis. But I belong to that, and of course there's a lot of these kind of side things, but the main thing is, of course, getting the Mass, which we've got to do either tonight or tomorrow, since it's a holy day. But the basement church was not intended to go on this long, but then we were coming out of the Depression in the 40s, and along about 1949, as I was going to say, the Kitzelmans next door here, which now we're sitting on their property, was not in favor of the church coming at all, and they didn't. They were, I think, pretty well anti-Catholic. But I can't really know that for sure. Didn't know them, of course. I was 9 years old. And I was serving, and 9 or 10. And I remember they said, I don't know if it was just before Christmas, we bought the Kitzelman estate. And I said, what for? It's too much money. There's no sense in having that. We got enough land here. Really, there wasn't enough land. They could have put a school here. It could have worked, but it still would be tight. And I could see where they could use a little more land. I still don't think they need this much. But anyway, The way they got it laid out is they're using all of it today. But anyway, I remember saying we were getting ready for a procession for something in the back room of the basement church, and I know on Christmas Eve, maybe that's when they first announced it. Father Sear had the Kisselman family in the front pew.
And you were what? How old at that time?
9 or 10.
9 or 10 years old.
And he announced, we bought the Kisselman estate. And I suppose he told that they were there. I don't remember that part. But anyway, and I thought, what the heck do we need all that land for? You know, that's a big undertaking. And boy, was it an undertaking. From then on, things flew.
Okay. The next question is memories of pastors and assistants.
Okay, well, I've touched on some of that. We're up to Father Muller, and he was pretty much the assistant. Of course, Father Sear, he was very dignified and very nice, very friendly, forceful, and got the job done. And he was my friend.
Now you went to church or went to school at St. Mary's.
I was baptized here. No, I didn't go to school. I was summer school.
Summer school.
Yeah, the regular elementary was not here then.
Okay.
It had, of course, up until 1949, we didn't have this Kitzelman estate, and of course the buildings hadn't been built yet. And they were built, and I think, I'm not too sure, I think there is in there one called the Funk building over there. Okay, that's named after Galen Funk's son that I think was killed during World War II. And what's the other one-story building called? Is that a Broderick?
Hartmeyer.
Okay, all right. Well, that was from John Sr., and then they named after him. I was thinking maybe Broderick was in there somewhere, but okay, Hartmeyer and Funk.
Well, they had, I think it's the Broderick House or something. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Is that like the Chateau or something?
Something like that.
Okay,
yeah.
all right. That's probably named after Joe Jr. He's gone too now. He's not all that many years older than me, I don't think. But he's been gone for a long time. And old Joe Senior, nice fellow, but nice people. And they had anyway. That was our pastor, and our assistant was Father Muller. And then we'd only had the one assistant before that, and that was Father Paulson. And he wound up in Monticello and had a parish up there for many years and built a church. After Father Muller was Father Grady. Father Grady was the assistant then. Now
this brings us up to what year? About 1960?
Oh no.
No.
No, we're still back in the
50s.
Yeah. I don't know the years that Father Grady spent here. Father Muller went to Reynolds, Indiana. He was there for many years, a little country parish, railroad track running right by the front door. It's still there, like that. And Father Muller was very heavy. I remember one time, no, wait a minute. We had another assistant before Father Grady, was Father Leah, Father James Leah, and I'd forgotten about him. I wasn't real fond of him. We got along fine, but I don't know. It was just not like Father Muller or Father Grady.
Now, all these priests you're naming, you served under, is that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, Father Paulson when I was a little kid. But Father Muller started me serving, and then I served with Father Leah and Father Sear. And, of course, Father Sear was not a Monsignor until later on. And I've always known him as Father Sear. In fact, his dad was around here for a long time. And, of course, the parish developed with the Kisselman estate. Of course, the big house had not been lived in for a while at that point. The one that then became a convent, and then now is the Gallagher Manor, was not it was not lived in, and so therefore it was not really run down, but it just hadn't been lived in for a while. You know how a house is when they said. Well, anyway, my aunt and uncle, that's Harry and Julia Dunkel, came over here from St. Lawrence after this place was purchased, and this was along about, well, let's see, 49, 50. It was in the early 50s. I would say probably about 1950. And they moved in to that Kitzelman house, and they became caretakers here. Now, my uncle still worked, but they lived here, and I would come over and I would spend time with them at night, stay all night, because I was, 12 by then, 11 maybe, long in there, and would spend the night, and then we'd do things like work around the yard. My uncle he mowed the grass. When I was a little kid like that, I he had a big riding lawnmower, the parish did by that time, and rode that. The sunken gardens, which everybody knows where that was, I think, it's where in that area where the outside stages of the cross are. They had real art with nudes in the middle of the fountains, statues, around. They had one lady riding a fish in the nude, Both of them were in the nude, but that was in the middle of that pond, facing the front door west. There's a little pond area. I think that pond's still there. But of course the statues aren't. They took those out. But down from the gazebo, which still stands, was the sunken gardens, and the gardens were very grown up, and the bushes, the evergreen hedges were all like a maze through there, and you could walk around through them and in between them and so on, and it was real neat. But anyway, by that time, shortly after that, my aunt and uncle were there for it seemed like quite a long time. But anyway, during those 3 or 4 years, from 49 to 53, a lot happened in the way of doing things around here. Of course, yard work was tremendous. So Father Muller would get a bunch of kids. I was one of them. I'd bring my dad's sickle, and the other kids would bring tools, cutting tools and so on. I suppose today it wouldn't be allowed. But I mean, all the kids had sharp instruments.
Well, no, not today.
But we were cutting weeds, and I don't remember anybody getting hurt. And if you notice, there's corner posts on this property, right between the old rectory and the new rectory here. There's corner posts on there. One of them was knocked down on the corner of Celia and Jackson, but there's still. When I was a kid, I could squeeze between the cement pillar and the first rung on the wrought iron fence there, and it's only not everybody could do that. I could slide through the. Otherwise, if we're cutting the grass underneath that or around that fence, that the big iron fence. If you want to go to the other side, you'd have to walk all the way down a half a block and go through a gate in order to get there.
So this fence has been
it was always
around the parish then all these years.
Yeah, well, it was around the Kesselman estate.
Okay.
And then, of course, this fence that ran between the new rectory and the old rectory was removed and set out. Then after we bought I don't know what that's called, not the chateau, that's over on the other corner, but the one that's right north of the Knoll Hall here with the garage.
I don't remember what that is.
I don't either, but anyway, moved that fence around that, so then it was around the whole parish, around all the ground. Let's see, there's still no fence on the corner, is there, out here, from Knoll Hall to Jackson, going that way.
I don't think so. No.
That's open. And of course, that's all mowed. Parish house was torn down eventually. All this happened during this 3 or 4 years, and then things started happening in the basement of the Kesselman house, which was going to be the new convent eventually. And they fixed up that house. My uncle did a lot of painting around there, and other people did too, other men of the parish. Uncle Harry and Aunt Jewel, they worked around here a lot. eventually, Father Muller, when we had the kids, all us kids would help. He would take us in and give us a Coke, after we got finished. And it would be a hot summer day. So anyway, let's see. He eventually was moved, and Father Leah came to the parish. And then it was after that, I always wanted to be a priest, and I wanted to go to the seminary. And I remember my aunt and I talking about it up in the future convent, where they lived on the second floor. There's a little kitchen up there, and of course we've got several apartments in there now, but there was a little kitchen in there, and they had just part of that place that they used on the second floor. And my mother's grandmother, this aunt and uncle was Mom's aunt and uncle, so it was my great aunt and uncle. And so it was Mom's grandmother, Aunt Julia's mother, that would come and stay with them. In fact, she did live there quite all the time, for most all the time when they were living up there. And that was Ellen Hosey. And Ellen Hosey, she was born, she was Irish. And actually, I think when they were coming over from Ireland, she was born in, I think, Canada, as they were coming down. Somehow they came into Canada first, I think. Anyway, and then her husband was born in Ireland, in Bilbao areas of what would that be? Anyway, the Bilbao area of Ireland. So that, of course, is Father Keith Hosey. That would be his grandmother, and he's my second cousin. So, of course, Father Keith was here too. Keith went to the seminary, of course, several years before I did. I remember he and I spent the night together, the night that I was getting ready to go to the seminary in 1953. And we spent it at his folks' house. And he said, well, we're going on new adventures. He was getting ready to go to the North American College in Rome, which he was gone for, I think, 5 or 6 years. And I was gone for, I went to the seminary at Wawasee, Our Lady of the Lake Seminary, for 3 years. And then I finished up high school. It was a junior seminary. But I finished up high school then at St. Mary's in Anderson. I still didn't have any high school here in Muncie. Still don't. That was the only Catholic high school close by. Of course, by that time I was finishing high school, I was old enough to drive myself over there. So this is going on. But anyway, Father Muller left in about 1950. 1, 2, long in there, and Father Leah was here. And I remember one time Father Muller took a group of kids to Lafayette, to the cathedral, I think for an ordination. And then his folks lived just nearby, and he then took us over. They had a big farm, and he was built a lot like his mother. She was big too. And I think his dad was too. I don't really remember him that well, but anyway. We went there for ice cream and we came back to Muncie. And then later on, Father Leah did something similar. He took us, it was maybe a carload of us, to Lafayette, to the cathedral, for something else. And I think that was probably an ordination also. I don't remember. It's been a long time ago. So it's been, over 50 years ago. So anyway, then I got out of high school. But the assistants, Father Grady came, and I was here for a while. Now, in 62, Father Grady was here. I think maybe, I don't know how long Father Leo was here. He was here quite a while. And there was, by the way, while I was in the seminary, we were talking about this about maybe, what 20? Well, we got 20 seminarians today, or thereabouts? Somewhere along in there. Right. We had 12 right here in this parish. Oh, we had a lot of seminarians in this diocese at that time. But then, everything was flourishing. My folks and I went down to Gethsemane, the Trappist monastery, about 1953 or 4. and I think maybe it was 1954, and there was about 260 monks there then. And we got there on haymaking day. They were all out making hay on one hot day. And but anyway, there was just a lot of religious, and it's wonderful that we're starting that way again. But anyway, I had a picture here when I went to seminary, and up until I went, this was originally Fort Wayne Diocese. Bishop Knoll had it, was the bishop, archbishop. And then Bishop Bennett, when they made Lafayette Diocese and made this part of Lafayette, Bishop Bennett was, and he was not well. There was a lot of times that he couldn't come every year for confirmation and so on. But anyway, this was shortly after. This picture was shortly after we did buy this place, and this was probably about 1951. I'm guessing, it's long in there. And that's Bishop Bennett on the over by the convent house, and we had mass out there in the open, up on the hill. And by this time, the grass, everything was clipped down in the sunken gardens, and the bushes were trimmed because all the maize was still there. Oh, and by the way, the black tulip was developed in two places in the United States. One of them was right here in the Sunken Gardens.
Oh, that's interesting.
Joe Whalen can tell you more about that too. He's the one that told me about it. But I remember the black tulips out here. There was lots of tulips when the kids, and my Aunt Jewel, she'd be talking to she talked to Mom a lot on the phone. She said, "Oh, I gotta go. Mr. Sears coming over here with a scythe. I gotta go." And there was a lot of things she didn't want cut, and she pretty well run things around the convent house there. So, but Mr. Sear was here, and by the way, Mr. Sear never referred to his son as anything but Father Sear. That's it. Maybe he did in private, but not to anybody else. So Father Sear will be here in just a little bit or whatever. He would tell. He was a swallow fellow too. But anyway, in that picture is Bishop Bennett. I was supposed to help along with, that's Jim Earhart holding the train. We were supposed to do that together, and all of a sudden somebody came along and handed me if I remember right, it was either something to do with oils or incense, some kind of a container. And and it was something that went with the bishop. Of course, there was a lot of pomp and circumstance to the bishops at that time, and especially Bishop Knoll. But anyway, because Bishop Knoll used to come to the seminary.
Now, is this a picture of Bishop Knoll?
That's
here?
Bishop Bennett.
Bishop Bennett.
Yeah, and this is Jim Earhart, and that's me right there. The other fellow, I don't know who that is. I don't remember. Can't see it well enough to know. But anyway, you can see Jim and me, and you can see Bishop Bennett, and there's two priests on each side of him. One of them might have been Monsignor Potoff, because he was our chancellor back those days. But anyway, things kept on going. But that's the early days of my recollection of St. Mary's Parish and the beginnings. And of course, things continued, and they built the schools and so forth. And then Father Greedy came. And by the time I got out of the seminary and through the 50s, and then in 62 I got married. And before I got married, my wife Judy lived at Daleville, and so I would go over, and this went on for like 3 years. I did this. We'd go over and pick her up on Sunday morning, and we'd go to Mass at St. Mary's in Anderson. So I was really away from St. Mary's for a while. I always lived in Muncie, but we moved to the St. Lawrence side of the tracks. And so Judy and I, once we got married, we had an apartment in town, in Muncie. Of course, I always lived out southwest with my folks, which was part of the parish. Anyway, we moved, and we went to St. Lawrence then for about 4 years. And then we bought a house right out here not too far from St. Mary's Church, and we lived there for 10 years, and over on Riverside for 7, and we've been out 22 years where we are now in the country. Not too far from where my folks' place is, and of course my folks are both gone, and Mom would come into daily Mass as much as possible, and Father Grady, I remember him saying during her funeral, says, he says, some snowy days, she'd come anyway, yeah.
Did she drive herself?
Oh, yeah.
Did she?
Always. But she would drive if there's a blizzard, or even, close to it. And that she'd make it to Mass a lot of days that she shouldn't even been out driving. And Father Grady said, you shouldn't even be here, So anyway, she was.
Okay. I do have a question on that. When you said you were a little boy and you were serving, and that all that you said in Latin, what does that mean in English?
Well, you get a hold of an old missal that's got both Latin and English in there, and it's got all the way through. It'll have one side.
Okay, the next question is, any events or other things that you would like to talk about?
Yes. Yes. Anyway, during the time, it was still, they had purchased the grounds here. My aunt and uncle were in the house, stayed in the house, or lived there. They also came up with the idea of a false festival. There's no B in festival, right? Anyway, a fall festival, of course, during sometime, I think was probably in October. This was not just an ordinary run. We also had ice cream socials during the summer all through the years, but this was separate and open to the public, and there would be a carnival come in with a merry-go-round, Ferris wheel, other rides. Bozo dunk tanks were new back then, where they had a clown, where you knocked him down with a baseball, and a lot of stuff like that. And then there was a lot of booths that the parish members ran, and my dad and I, for 3 years, ran the balloon booth, where we would throw darts at balloons and get prizes. And then it was a dangerous job because we didn't have one of those boards that turns around and you put them on the back and then flip it around. We had to stop everybody so we go put up fresh balloons, Especially you get a bunch of kids throwing darts. It's not good. Well, anyway, that went on for, I don't know how many years. We did it 3 years. And then I was in the seminary, and it was still going on for a while. I would say that fall festival probably went on maybe 7 years. Each year they would put this on. And they would raise, and the idea, and it was put on, the area that it was set up was right where the church is today. And it was, of course, there was no church there, and the old hall wasn't there. We were still in the basement church, but it was in this ground around where the church is today, and on south to Jackson Street in that fence. Where people parked, I don't know. They must have parked for blocks around here out on the street, and it was noisy. It was like a fair. I can just imagine the people around here, but they raised money, and they would raise a few $1,000s each year, and that was a big chunk of what really got things moving around here.
Now, was this collected to start a new church?
Start the church, yeah.
Okay.
It was to build the church, and everything else around here, but it was mainly for the new church. Of course, from 1930 on, everything was pushed toward building the church. And Father Sear had a background of architecture, so he drew up plans. He went through several architects trying to get exactly what he wanted. He finally did, apparently, and he talked a lot about it over the years. And they had after a while, the Newman Club was given money by Bishop Noel from the Fort Wayne Diocese, because the Newman Club at Ball State had been formed when this was still under the auspices of Diocese of Fort Wayne. So anyway, this money came, and they built Knoll Hall. And it was with the idea that they would build Knoll Hall on top of our church. And they did. And then it was with the idea that they would then turn it over to St. Mary's when they moved on. And I don't think that happened. If I remember right, the parish paid them for that too. Okay. Even so, you know. But anyway, which I don't think should have happened. But finances is another thing. But anyway, once Knoll Hall was up, of course it was used by the parish also as well as the Newman Club. And this was the Newman Parish at the time until they finally got St. Francis going. And so they had, it was instituted, Father Sear and Harry Dumple, my uncle, put together bingo. We had bingo games for a long time, upstairs in Knoll Hall there. And this was a weekly event, and a few times it got raided. But then, when the police came, it was Jim Carey, member of the parish. So this thing was kind of, you know, they had to go raid it, but then it was kind of pushed aside anyway, and they went back the next week or two playing bingo. And now, when Father Grady became pastor, eventually, that went by the wayside. But of course, there was Father McDonald in there before Father Grady as pastor. I knew Father McDonald because he had been an assistant at St. Lawrence. I went to St. Lawrence grade school, by the way, from fifth through the 8th grade before I went to Wawasee. And so Father McDonald became pastor. And by this time, Uncle Harry and Aunt Jewel Dumple there were so many people pushing and asking questions and giving them calls all times of the day and night, and they were disturbed, especially Aunt Jewel, which was kind of high-strung anyway, but they wanted to get out of here, wanted to get away from living here. So they rented a home over on close to the High Street, or close to the Jackson Street Bridge on Jackson Street. I think it was about 2 houses just west of there on the south side of the road. Well, anyway, after that, I think they started hiring janitors and so on. But then Father McDonald came in, and during most of Father McDonald's stay here, of course, we had the new church by then. Father Sear had a heart attack, but survived, and a lot of it was stress.
So then Father McDonald got the pastorship then.
When Father Sear retired, when Monsignor Sear was made a Monsignor by that time, and he retired, and then Father McDonald came in next. And it was during that time, when Father McDonald was here, it was during the early, when Judy and I was first married, and I wasn't here very much. But the church was here. Well, we were, come to think of it, Father Sear was still here when we got married. So I wasn't here for about 2 years of when Father Sear, well, they were building the church. I was going to St. Let's see, Judy and I got married in '62, and I don't remember what year they finished the church, really. But I remember Monsignor Sear taking us through the church before it was completed. You know, it was up, but it was just vacant in there, and he was explaining what was going to be the altar and how it was going to be. And then Father McDonald came in, and Father McDonald's the one that built the new rectory, which I remember him. I was in the old rectory when he was there, and he got sick, and I stopped by and saw him one time. But then of course we move on after him into Father Grady. But and I was by the time Father Grady came, I was Judy and I had moved over into this parish, back into this parish by the time before Father McDonald left, before he died. So I was around with Father McDonald for a while. And I was here the day Father Grady came back. You probably were too.
Yeah, I was here when Father Grady came back.
Yeah.
Back. He had left and come back.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, because we joined the church here and we were married in 58. So
now, your husband was always a member here, wasn't he?
No, he was, he graduated from, I went to school at St. Lawrence.
Oh, so the whole family went to St. Lawrence? Because I remember his brother was a seminarian with us.
Right.
And I was thinking he was at St. Mary's as a seminarian. Jim McDonald. Bob McDonald.
Bob.
Yeah, we called him Jim in the seminary.
Yeah, it was Robert James, I think.
Yeah, Jimmy Bob or something like that, or the other. I haven't seen him for a long time.
So, okay, well, I think then this probably will end this session, and we do want to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was quite a thing going down memory lane.
Right.